Hi everyone, this is Chris Petri. Welcome back. We're going to have some interesting fun today. We're going to actually do some sailing ships. And we're going to just kind of practice on these and we'll start off as we always do with a light pencil sketch, so we can kind of focus in on either a photograph you might be working from or a book, like a study book, a watercolor study book. Sometimes I know many people work from like their iPads, so wherever your image is that you're going to copy, you just put that out in front of you, across from you. You might be sitting at a table or standing at a desk and so forth, so you just get yourself comfortable. And first thing we'd like to do, so we're going to do a sailing ships, I should say. We're going to do a light preliminary sketch, just so we can kind of get a feel for the picture. Now this could be like, let's say you're going to do a painting, perhaps maybe a few sailing ships, maybe some docks, some beach area with maybe like a lifeguard chair, or different kind of things like that. Like you might have a picture with many parts to it. So let's just say we're going to take this painting that we're looking at and we're going to paint it like a larger painting, let's say. So we want to practice the smaller parts first. So maybe we would do the lifeguard chair a couple times, then we would draw and paint the lifeguard chair a few times, then we would draw and paint some ships a few times, maybe a couple boats, small rowboats a couple times, draw and paint those a few times, maybe 5 or 10 times separately. And then when we go to paint the larger painting, then we just take go about it the same way we would as if we were practicing. We would just take our sheet of paper and we would start drawing and lay out with a light preliminary sketch all the parts to the painting. Now if we're just practicing like we are now, we're just going to do some sailing ships, so we're just going to do those specifically and not maybe, let's say, the whole painting. So let's just practice on some sailing ships and see what we have here. So I'll pretend that this sailing ship is maybe about 2/3, 1/3 up from the bottom of the page. And I'm going to contour draw it, and I'm looking at my photograph across from me, and we're going to go up like this. And I'm just contour drawing, following the picture. And there's a line up here I see. So now here, we could consider this a preliminary sketch, but this is not incredibly complicated, so I'm just going to consider this my finished contour drawing here. And then there's another sailing ship here. Okay, and then we're going to go across here and we're going to do the mast with the sails. Okay, and then over here, so I'm just slowly working around here on the sails and the masts of these boats. And the sails are furled up tightly. Okay, and then we'll maybe just put a few indications of some ropes and lines, some rigging. And these might, the sails or the masts are going out of the picture, which is okay. So in essence, we're sort of zoomed in on this. And then maybe let's put some land across the in the distance over here. Maybe there's some more boats over here, a couple sailing ships over here in the distance. And some mountains, let's say, some hills. And maybe there's another sailboat over here. So I'm just contour drawing. And then I'm going to put in some indications of some sand and I would say this is maybe some shallow water over here, and then maybe over here the boats are sort of up on the sand. They're maybe just dry docked a little bit. And we're going to put a shadow over here. So I'm going to start to kind of finish up my idea here. Some shadowing under here. So the light's coming from here this way, so we're seeing the shadows, and it's probably high up in the sky, so it's almost, the light's probably is coming from this direction, and then it's sort of high up in the sky, let's say overhead, like maybe in the middle of the day. And so over here I'm just going to kind of put some light sketches of where I want to put some colors and some shapes. And then I'm going to have some so this would be the distant areas across the way here. This might be ocean and some hills and some rocks. And sometimes you can kind of just have fun and put some color and shapes over the top of where the boat is, the top of the boat. Just so you can kind of negative shape the top of the boat a little bit to make it stand out. And we'll maybe put a stripe along the top of this boat. So I'm going to slowly contour draw that across the way here. So then we'll make this dark, so you can do a little shadowing sometimes to keep you on track. Like let's to keep ourselves on track with this, like if we're doing a boat like this and we're looking at a photograph or a book or another painting or so forth, let's keep ourselves on track. We'll put a little shadowing in, let's say, an area where we know that's going to be very dark. So this section of the boat's going to be very dark, and then this stripe up here is going to be light, and then down here this is going to be a lighter color with some middle tonal values down here, and then this is going to be a dark shadow. So sometimes if we just do a little light pencil shading, then when we go into paint, we're kind of going to have that little bit of a help for ourselves to know which parts are going to be the darker tonal values and then which are going to stay light. So now we kind of know this is the light stripe, this will be the dark main portion of the boat, side of the boat, and then here we have another lighter section of the boat, and then under here we have the shadows that sort of run along the underside of the sailboat and along the front here. And the same thing over here, a little bit of shadowing under there. And I just did a couple more sails there. Alright, so this is looking pretty good, and we'll have a little foreground here. We'll just put a little color there, and we'll do some clouds in the sky to make an interesting bit of color. So what we can do at this point is we'll we can start out with the darkest tonal values, and we'll key in on the fact that we're going to do this alla prima, all in one go. So we're going to do this painting. We're going to do this painting all at one time. We're not going to do glazings. Sometimes, you'll notice I'll do glazings where we might do a light wash over everything and then come back over a second or third time with darker tonal values. Here we're just going to go straight in and paint it as we go. And the alla prima style, or we can also refer to it as the direct approach, just painting directly on the paper and not doing any glazings for the most part. So I'm going to mix up some cool colors here, some interesting blues, some greens, and then I have some yellow ochre and cerulean blue just for some added variety, and some burnt umber, burnt sienna. So we got some really excellent darks here, and then some middle tones, those nice gold colors. And we'll start in, and we'll start working the main portion of the sailing ship here. So here I'm just going nice and easy, nothing fancy, just going across. Loading up my brush with tons of thick paint. You can see that paint's not really running at all, so that's what we're looking for. To get those rich, beautiful darks, we have to make sure that that paint has just a little bit of water in it, not much, mostly paint. And we'll just go across, and then maybe we'll pick up a little bit of the yellow ochre and some cerulean blue, and then we'll some French ultramarine blue here. Maybe mix in some nice sap green. Now here, what I hope we're seeing is, sometimes I'll take off some of the water off my brush like that on a tissue. And what we're seeing here is some cobalt blue with a little bit of that darker color. So I hope what we're seeing here is I use lots of variation of color. Sometimes the temptation is, when we're painting, is to kind of go. We tend to want to go fast, and we might just do something like this for the boat. And that can be an interesting look too if you're going for a more simplified looking painting, where you just kind of use maybe one or two blue colors. But this really looks great. There's lots of different colors and variation in that, and I think that looks fantastic. And this is, again, that's another way you can paint. You can paint with less color variation. It's up to you. You're the artist. You decide how you want your paintings to look. But for this painting, we're going to do a lot of variation with color to get that nice, beautiful dark stripe on that sailing ship. And we'll do some shadowing underneath. Maybe we'll get some mineral violet. And then here I'll kind of get some lighter tonal value. And again, I'm sort of leaving a line between the dark and the light so that the colors don't maybe run as much. I want to try to keep that white stripe on the bottom of the boat. That lighter tonal value. So that's what kind of really helps, is kind of leaving that white line. And then I can carefully maybe go in a few areas and see how it's going to react, and it looks alright. I can actually tie those together now. And here we'll do the same thing. We'll get a little bit of color on that white stripe on the top of the boat. And some cerulean blue over here. And then I soften that out with some, I clean the brush off in the water pail. Take a little bit of water off the brush with the tissue, and then I can just sort of dampen the paper a little bit just to get a little bit of color. And there we have it. We have a nice, might have been, maybe I should have left that white line along the bottom here. But we can always pick up a little bit of paint with the tissue here, and won't be a problem. Okay, and then we're going to go in and get some burnt sienna, some burnt umber, a little bit of French ultramarine blue, maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson, and we'll just put in some color on the top here of the boat. So here's where you can have fun. We're just pretending there's a mountain in the distance over here and some hills. And I'm going to try to mix up the colors a little. And then when you're doing these distant type colors, and you can just have fun and mix some different things on the palette. Here you're starting to see I'm really starting to mix up the paints quite a bit, and that's not a big deal, because we're doing these distant hills and no one's going to really, it's not a large focal point in the painting, so if we use mixtures of colors, that's fine. That's going to look alright. I'll get some cadmium red. Put a little bit of cadmium red there. That's going to be that'll be our second sailing ship with a nice red bow. And then we can get a little bit of variation. Maybe we can pick up a little paint. I'll put a little bit of Viridian green in there just to have a little interesting color. And then over here in the distance, with these other boats, this is fine. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can kind of just carve out the shapes a little bit. And again, we're going to still keep working on our distant mountains a little bit. And I'm putting different colors in. And then we can do some burnt sienna and alizarin crimson for our sails. And then here I'm spinning my brush around this way to since the shapes are kind of like pointing this way, I'll point my brush the same way as I see the shapes. and I'm changing the colors. And then if you have a problem where you, I guess it's good to be careful when you're painting. I rested my hand on top of the paper here, so it's good to keep an idea on what stuff is still wet on your painting. So if you find you have some areas that are still dry, just try to keep them, maybe try to just keep a pinky or a couple fingers just on the paper versus resting your whole hand on the paper. So sometimes you have to kind of work with what you're. The other way to do that would be just to let this part dry and then come back in and work on the sails. So you can do it that way. That's probably the best way, and it's good to take breaks. I'm continuing on here and working, but breaks are good. And when I'm actually doing a finish painting, I always take a lot of breaks. And then on my breaks, I'll empty my water pail, put new fresh water in, spruce up my colors, clean my palette. Now's a good time to to clean up the palette a little bit. So I just remove the paint on the palette with some paper towel. And then we have a clean palette, and then we can just keep working, and it's gonna look good. I'm gonna move to a larger brush, and we'll put some warm colors, sand colors. So we'll put some raw sienna, a little bit of orange, cadmium orange, some alizarin crimson, and we'll maybe just get some nice colors, warm sand kind of feeling. I'll put a little bit of burnt umber and raw sienna, and we'll do a little bit of sand kind of feel. A little bit of orange, cadmium orange. And again, we're doing this for fun, we're doing this for practice. So a little bit of cool, some cool colors mixed in here. A little bit of purple, shadow colors, some blue, there we go. We have some nice interesting sand and warm colors of the sand. If you find that you have too much paint and you can always do that too. If you feel like you've added too much water or paint, you can do that. You can swipe up some paint and then come back and maybe do a couple splashes just so it's looking interesting. And then we'll do some sky colors. Here, sky is sort of a mellow background type feel. The star of the show is the boats here, so we don't have to be too concerned with getting a perfect sky. I'm going to do a little burnt umber to the blue for a little bit of a grayish feel there. I'll leave white paper. And again, we're practicing. We've done the main thing we wanted to do is practice our boat. So since we did practice our boat, we're happy. We got that done. Now we can just have fun and, have a good time and practice some techniques, try out some new things with our paint and paint brushes. And And then as I get down toward the bottom of the painting, I'm using more water, less paint, so I'm kind of getting a little bit lighter with the tonal values. Here I'm careful to get some sky color by these sails on this sailboat, but I don't want to go too many times across with the brush, or it's going to make these sails start to activate and bleed out into the different colors. So if you're painting, doing the straightforward, the alla prima approach like this, keep in mind that if you do have areas that you've already painted dark, be very careful not to do too much disturbance of those areas that you have painted already, because you can already see how it's starting to blossom out like that. The better thing would have been for me to do the sky first and then finish up with the sails, but I did the sails first, no big deal. We just have to keep an eye on that and make sure we have a tissue at hand just in case anything starts to. And then I'm just doing a little tiny bit of cadmium orange on the horizon here. And I think that's looking good. We did our practice, and then the only thing I would do to finish up this painting might be to I might do an exciting some cadmium red with a really fine needlepoint brush. I would do a stripe on this boat over here, so that this part of the painting can be a very interesting part as well, by just adding some exciting color like that. Maybe a touch of cerulean blue, so that's cadmium red, and then maybe a little bit of cerulean blue along the bottom of the boat. And then again, once this is all dry, when the sky completely dries, then we can go in and do our sails with this needlepoint brush. Very quickly, just one, two, a few. Maybe I'll get the, we'll do the quick approach here. Usually it's best to let your paintings dry naturally, but I will take a blow dryer and we'll see if we can dry this up quick. Alright, this is really looking good. This is drying nice with the blow dryer. That's one of the keys to the alla prima approach is working a little bit, letting things dry a little bit, working a little more, letting things dry. I tend to work faster and try to rush things when I do videos a little bit. But again, this is just practice. We're practicing our sailing ships. So if we come up to a painting that we want to do, we've practiced sailing ships 5 or 10 times. And then when we come to a painting that we want to do with some sailing ships, we have already done it quite a few times, and it'll be comfortable when we go to paint it. And we won't stress over it.